We're in Ulaanbaatar today, Mongolia. Got some stats. We are currently 8,430 kilometers away from Seattle. We are 6,121 kilometers away from Anchorage, and a 737-800 has a range of about 5,421 kilometers. So, what is this doing here? What is this doing here?
Why Mongolia? Well, let's start with where we're actually flying today. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we're not going to the US of A. No, we're flying to Tokyo, but this probably raises even more questions. Like, why in the world is United, a US airline, flying between Mongolia and Japan? How can they legally do this? But then also, how did this 737 even get here? This plane doesn't have the range to make it over the Pacific. Has United just sent one over to fly it to Mongolia? And then the crew, are they Japanese, or is United getting their US crew to jump onto these tag flights to Ulaanbaatar? Are they Americans? Let's start with this route and the strategy here. This Mongolia flight is not the only intra-Asia flight operated by United. Since late 2024, they've started limited services to Cebu in the Philippines, I'm going to butcher this one, but Kaohsiung in Taiwan, and well, Ulaanbaatar. But they're also about to begin service to Palau in late October of 2025. United's network planners have turned Tokyo's Narita airport into a mini hub. Essentially, big wide-body jets full of people arrive from the US, and then these smaller 737s shuttle some of them onwards to hard-to-reach and niche destinations, and vice versa when they want to go home. But how can they do this, legally speaking? Generally, under normal aviation regulations, countries guard their skies. They protect their own carriers. For instance, China is only letting US airlines fly between the US and China, not between China and Mongolia. This kind of route, called a fifth freedom flight, can only exist if the host country specifically allows it in a treaty. Japan is a bit unusual here though. Back in 1952, when they regained sovereignty after World War II, they signed a bilateral air services agreement with the United States. At the time, Japan didn't have much of an international airline presence, and the US held enormous leverage as an occupying power and new ally. The treaty gave two US carriers, Pan Am and Northwest, extremely broad rights, not just to fly to Japan, but also to carry passengers onwards from Japan to dozens of Asian cities. They used these rights to build up substantial Tokyo hubs. But how did United get involved? Well, back in the early 80s, United was one of America's largest airlines, but despite its size, it did not fly long-haul international routes. This was not a strategic choice that they had made, but instead a side effect of airline regulations at the time. We've touched on this in past videos, but the US market was deregulated in 1978. This removed government controls on who could fly when and where, domestically, but international flying was, and is, in some cases, still a heavily controlled market. Bilateral air service agreements between nations can have tight caps, and typically once an airline wins the right for a route, they will rarely relinquish it. Pan Am and Northwest had Asia, TWA and Pan Am had Europe and the Middle East, Braniff and Pan Am carved up Latin America. Pan Am truly was America's international airline. United had been trying for decades to win the right to fly long-haul international routes, but kept on getting knocked back. They finally got a breakthrough in the early 80s when they were allowed to start services to both Tokyo and Hong Kong from Seattle. This all came about from small cracks in the market and the regulations. Firstly, Hong Kong was always fairly liberal with its air service agreements, and in the early 80s, Braniff collapsed. They had a route to Hong Kong, and this was now up for grabs. United lobbied hard and won the right to serve Hong Kong. Japan was a little bit more complicated. At this point, the Japanese government and JAL weren't exactly happy that Pan Am and Northwest had these broad flying rights. JAL was having to compete with the US airlines in both Pacific routes, but also inter-Asia flying, due to the fifth freedom rights that allowed them to set up hubs in Tokyo. Things got even more fun for JAL here because they had, for years, wanted to fly to additional cities in the US, but were not keen on giving Northwest or Pan Am more capacity to Tokyo, as an inevitable result of any increase in the bilateral air agreement with the US government. The solution lay in giving United a route to Japan. United wouldn't have the same fifth freedom rights as Pan Am or Northwest, meaning they wouldn't be competing with JAL on intra-Asia flights, and their massive domestic US network would put put the other two US carriers at a disadvantage. After years of negotiations, this solution was finally implemented and United started flying from Seattle to Tokyo in 1983. Finally, international service. United was flying to Asia, but they only had 2 routes. Of course, they wanted more. And the opportunity came in the mid-80s. Now, there's a boatload of factors that led to the collapse of Pan Am. We can save most of the story for another video, but in 1980, they acquired National Airlines. This was a move to expand into the US domestic space. This acquisition was a disaster. They'd overpaid and the integration was a nightmare. They started hemorrhaging money. So in 1985, they made the bold move of selling off their Pacific division to United. For $750 million, United almost overnight went from having only 2 long-haul routes to being an international giant. They quickly consolidated and grew their Pacific operations. They started flying all over. They had routes to Australia and New Zealand, etc. Tokyo's Narita Airport became one of United's largest international gateways through the 1990s. Functioning as a scissor hub, multiple United 747s and 777s would arrive from US gateways. They would exchange passengers and then continue flying to major Asian capitals like Bangkok, Singapore, and Seoul. However, the development of a new generation of hyper-efficient, long-range, twin-engine jets like the 787 and the A350 made direct non-stop flights from the US to secondary Asian cities more economically viable. This reduced the need to route all traffic through a single Asian hub. In response to this, United progressively wound down its intra-Asia flying from Narita, culminating in the termination of its last Narita-based Fifth Freedom flight to Seoul in 2017, and the closure of its Narita flight attendant base in 2020. Somewhat ironically, in 2010, the US and Japan signed an open skies agreement. Theoretically, under this, any US carrier could operate beyond Japan. They could spin up a hub in Tokyo. But either way, the Tokyo hub era was over. Or maybe it just took an 8-year hiatus. What is United doing now with these 737s? Have they restarted their crew base in Tokyo? No. This time around, they are uniquely utilizing their other inherited Asian hub to spin up Tokyo 2.0 in a way that no other US carrier can really replicate. We'll get into all of that in a minute. But first, let's get on this plane and get out of Mongolia. Not that there's anything wrong with Mongolia. Apart from the traffic, it's quite an interesting place.
I think it's time to finally board. I think they're getting serious. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hello. Oh, thank you. Very good. USA. So I paid another $40 US, what's that, like $70 for an exit row seat because I was going to end up in a seat with 2 people next to me. It was looking like from the seat map. Anyway, definitely paid off. Nobody sitting next to me got a free row. $70 well spent. That was worth a gamble. I was checking in the car on the way here because I was not sure if I was going to make it, but...
Now, I skipped over this earlier, but the drive to the airport was an absolute nightmare. Let me give you the quick 1-minute PSA for Ulaanbaatar if you ever happen to visit this place. Chinggis Khan Airport, yes, they don't call him Genghis in Mongolia, is about a 45-minute to 1-hour drive from the city. I landed a couple of days earlier at 3 a.m. in the morning. It was a 45-minute drive. Anyway, my flight out was at 9:55 a.m. I was checking Google Maps and it looked like it was going to be around a 1-hour drive. So I booked a UB cab for 7 a.m. They don't have Uber here. This is their local version. I figured this would get me to the airport before 8 a.m., a good 2 hours before my flight. Yeah. Well, these local drivers don't seem to like Google Maps. And instead of taking the 1-hour route, my guy decided to just head straight down the main highway. And we got stuck in a pretty major traffic jam. The Google Maps ETA crept up and at one point I was looking up alternative flights. Luckily we did finally get moving, but I still got to the airport with only 5 minutes until check-in closed. I was running through security here. So if you're flying out of here, be prepared for a long drive to the airport. Also, just another random fun fact here, Mongolia drives on the right side of the road, so they should have left-hand drive cars, right? Well, no. Due to the prevalence of cheap used Japanese imports, as of 2021, 58% of the cars on the road are right-hand drive. It is quite confusing when you hop in a car here. You'd really think at this point they would just switch to driving on the left, but I guess that comes with a whole other kettle of fish. let's get to this plane and the crew. United didn't ferry this thing over from the mainland, right? This isn't a San Francisco-based crew. No, of course not. The planes they're using here and the crew are all based out of Guam, US's tourism island come military base in the Western Pacific. But how did United end up with another Asia-Pacific hub? Well, this all goes back to the late 1960s, when Continental Airlines won a US government bid to connect the Micronesian islands. They spun up a new subsidiary called Air Micronesia, or as it was otherwise known, Air Mic. This was an airline based in Guam, and they started out serving the scattered islands that made up the US-administered Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. This included the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, and the Northern Mariana Islands. The airline started with a single 727 and a DC-6. Interestingly, the 727 was specifically outfitted for the rough island conditions. It had a Teflon-coated belly to guard against coral runway debris, and they flew with spare parts and a mechanic on board in case of any en route repairs. Air Mic provided some of the first reliable airlinks for many of these communities and was an important factor in their early development. One of the most notable routes that's still around today is the infamous Island Hopper service. This is a route from Hawaii to Guam that stops in a bunch of tiny atolls on the way. Today, it's flown with a 737, and the total journey time can be upwards of 16 hours. Who knows, I might do this one day, I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to see me suffer through that. By the late 70s, Air Mic's focus started to shift. It stopped being just an essential air service for disparate islands and instead turned into a tourism-led growth engine for Continental. This was all thanks to Japan. Their burgeoning middle class started to see Guam as an excellent holiday destination. It was the Americanized tropical island less than a 4-hour flight away. Air Mic was rebranded as Continental Air Micronesia, and they locked in on Japan. They added 737s to the fleet, and all of a sudden, dozens of weekly flights were ferrying Japanese tourists to Guam's beaches and resorts. The results were dramatic. By 1997, Guam welcomed over 1.1 million Japanese tourists annually, and they comprised about 80% of all Guam tourists that year. At the peak in the late 90s, Continental Micronesia operated over 200 weekly flights in the region and was Guam's largest private employer, with over 1,500 staff. The growth did slow in the late 90s after the Asian financial crisis, and this forced Continental to scale back operations, but they still remained the dominant airline in Guam throughout the 2000s. Now, I've been yapping on about Continental here, but where does United come into this? Half of you are probably well aware of this, but in 2010, United and Continental merged. This was truly a merger of equals and created United Continental Holdings. The company took on the United brand name, but a lot of the branding and the livery, the globe on the tail of all of the United planes, that comes from Continental. This merger created the world's largest airline at the time, and well, this is how we've ended up with the United brand in Guam. But what role does Guam play in this new Tokyo mini hub? I mentioned earlier that under the 2010 US-Japanese Open Skies framework, any US airline can, in principle, operate flights beyond Japan. They could open a Tokyo hub. But to actually do it, you need aircraft, crews, and slots in the right place. And well, for United, Guam is close enough to the right place. What they are doing here is use Guam-based 737s and crews to operate these Tokyo flights. But how does this work in practice? Let's take a quick look at what this plane, the one I'm on for this flight, did for the 2 days leading up to my flight on the 26th of September. Starting in Guam on the Wednesday morning, it did a quick return trip to Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands. Then in the afternoon, it was off to Tokyo. Then that evening, it was off to Kaohsiung in Taiwan. After a busy day, it was allowed to have a full night's sleep, and on Thursday morning, it was heading back to Tokyo, arriving in the afternoon. That evening, it was off to Mongolia. Again, it was allowed to have a full night's sleep in Ulaanbaatar before it operated my flight back to Tokyo in the morning. After we landed, it headed back home with a late afternoon flight back to Guam. In short, the Guam operation is allowing United to cheaply and easily spin up Narita operations in a way that no other US airline really could. But why are they doing this? I mean, There is clearly demand. Despite me having 3 free seats, the plane was fairly full. But there's also this case of Guam's visitor numbers. Tourism hasn't fully returned post-COVID. 2024 arrivals were down 56% versus 2019 numbers. And I think a large part of this is Japan. The weak yen has really reduced their propensity to travel. We saw this in my ANA A380 video I made a year and a half ago now. Japan is just not traveling like they used to. United hasn't explicitly stated this, but I'd guess that they had aircraft and crews in Guam that weren't being fully utilized. Rather than park the planes, they've redeployed that capacity to Narita to launch these Fifth Freedom hops. But has this Tokyo 2.0 plan been a success? Well, back in April of 2025, when they were just operating the Tokyo to Cebu route, they hadn't yet started the Taiwan or Mongolia services. Patrick Quayle, United's head of global network planning, was asked if the Cebu route was a success. His response? You don't double down on something that does poorly. And well, they are continuing to double down. Cebu and Kaohsiung are both daily services that have stuck around, and this particular Mongolia flight is just a seasonal route operating 3 times a week. But again, my flight was fairly full, and they are adding Palau services next. They've also just announced that they will replace the Guam-based 737-800 fleet with 737 MAX 8s, explicitly stating that these jets will work both Micronesia routes and the Narita Fifth Freedom tags. You don't buy new planes for something that isn't working. So, at least from the outside and what we can gather from what they've said, I think this plan, at least so far, is a success.
So I wasn't sure if there was going to be food on this flight, or if we'd have to pay for it, or what, because it's a short, I mean, it is an international flight, it's like 4 hours, but I don't know, it's United. You have to pay for everything when you fly domestically in the US. New York to LA, and you got to buy food, right? And that's like 6 or 7 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours? I don't know. So yeah, I wasn't sure if there was going to be food or not. Well, turns out there is. We're all good. I got the udon noodles, which actually are tofu. Wasn't expecting that. Anyway, we'll suffer through that. Got more noodles. I guess that's the salad component, but it's just more noodles. And then we've also got, I love this, we've got New Zealand butter. Now, I think that either has Japanese or Chinese on it. And obviously we went to Mongolia, so this butter's gone from New Zealand to either China or Japan and then to Mongolia, and now it's coming back. International trade is crazy. Anyway, I'm gonna eat this. I also got Coke Zero in a cool Star Wars can. This one's got Japanese all over it, so it must come from Japan. The crew are that American customer service friendly, which I love, but some people find it a bit ingenuous.
Disingenuous.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Anyway, super friendly. I'm gonna eat. I'm not particularly hungry, but I'm not hungry either. Okay, that would go down as a surprisingly decent economy meal. Everything tasted really good. I wasn't even expecting food. I do want to mention the entertainment quickly. There's actually not that much going on, but I still kind of like it. There are screens here. We've got the Minecraft movie going, but I guess more importantly, you don't actually get to choose what to watch. They've just got, well, you do kind of. They got 11 channels. Yeah, I don't hate this. I'm the type of person that gets stuck in analysis paralysis when it comes to deciding what to watch on a plane or on Netflix. Yeah, limited choices are good for me. I probably won't actually watch that much stuff. Might try and get some work done, but I'll have the Minecraft movie on in the background. I haven't seen it yet. Chicken Jockey. I am a big fan of Steve, though. I was big in Minecraft like 10 or 15 years ago, which is scary to say. 15 years.
At 3:34 local time. For your continued safety and comfort, please remain seated. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. It's hot right now in Tokyo. It's like 25, 30 degrees. I gotta take this off. There is so many United planes here right now. There's like 3 over there. There's another 3 over here. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. Look at this. So we just came from that side, and there's 3 over there. But then we got another 737 there, Dreamliner there. What's that, another Dreamliner? And then all the way over there, we've got another 737. Are we in Japan or is this a United hub?
So that's why a United 737 is in Mongolia. I hope you all learned something here. If you did, make sure to subscribe. Also, I'm currently on a trip filming a bunch of new videos. You can follow along live on my Instagram here. Also, go follow me on LinkedIn here. I will start ironically posting soon. Go check out the Flight Formula website. Go subscribe to Wine Tracker Plus. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.
Simon? Is that Simon?
What's Simon?
We even got one of the ANA A380s over there. Can you see it? There it is. Anyway, if you haven't seen that video, I will link it up there. Otherwise, yeah, in Japan now. That was a surprisingly good flight, I want to say.